Welcome to Fully Alive Radio. We're here today with Tatiana Macduff. I'm your host, Brenda Nesbitt. And Tatiana lives out west of Last Chance in Colorado, near the little town of Byers, and that happens to have been a dream of hers. She moved there about a couple years ago.
3 years ago.
3 years ago, and with her husband, Macduff, who's also part of this grand adventure, and quite an adventure it was. But it started kind of with a dream.
Ever since I was a child, I had a dream to live on a farm. My parents had farmer friends, and we'd go out and visit, and so it was always there, but it didn't seem like it could ever become real. And at one point, while we lived in Castle Rock, I read an ad in the paper, the local paper, a house for sale that was at a price we could actually afford. So we went and looked at it. It was in Cherry Valley. Too small a house, too small a lot, but it sparked something. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I had this sense of urgency that I cannot explain to this day, except that I do know this. Had we not moved when we did, the market was crashing a year later, and I truly do feel that it was our last chance. We started looking at houses around Douglas County. Nothing was affordable, nothing was suitable. And then one day I was visiting my daughter out in Aurora, and I saw a sign there on Colfax, Byers, 30 miles. And I said to Alec, maybe we can afford land out in Byers. So, took him on another roller coaster ride, and we drove out towards Byers, stopped at a convenience store, got a newspaper, found an ad, went and looked at that place. Wasn't quite what we wanted, kind of desolate. Mind you, when I was about 20 years old, I had a dream. I had an actual dream that I woke up to. I saw myself looking out a kitchen window, tall weeds and grass, and a picket fence, a white picket fence. When we lived in Castle Rock, which was our first home, by the way, I'd look out the kitchen window and it wasn't there, and I knew that it wasn't where I was meant to be. I never forgot that dream. This two-story house, I always wanted a two-story. Out in the distance, the driveway's about a third of a mile long. There's no for sale sign. And I tell him, I want to look at that house. And he's like, we can't just go out there and look at that house. Someone lives there. I'm like, no one lives there. I just know it. We need to go look at this house. So I get him to drive us out there, and the garage door is open. Well, we go in. And it's into the house through the garage door.
Okay.
And it's pretty obvious it's not quite finished, but we didn't know what the deal was. Someone could have been building it for themselves. As we're leaving, and I just told him, I said, I love this place, this is it, I love this place. There was a view of the creek bed with the cottonwoods, the prairie was there, it was just beautiful. And
at this point is thinking, we're trespassing.
Yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden we're leaving and someone shows up, and we're like, we're busted. Well, anyway, so we end up talking to him, and he claims he's the owner, though we found that hard to believe. He was dressed in a holy shirt and all this stuff, but he convinced us, and we got his name and information and found out the house was not yet on the market, but was going to be.
Wow.
And it was like, this is meant to be. We're waiting, it's months. We get a phone call, the house has sold. And we were devastated. I cried for days. I mean, I cried for weeks, I really did. And we actually went and took all our stuff out of storage and put it back into the house. We had boxes everywhere. And one day I read in this devotional I read every night, February 23rd. This is after we thought the house was gone forever. The title of this devotional was Possess the Land. And I won't read it, but the first thing I thought was, oh, there's still hope. But I wasn't thinking of that house. I was thinking I need to call some land brokers, and maybe we can buy land, and then maybe in 10 years we can build a house and all of this stuff. You got to understand, we didn't have a lot of money either.
Who did?
Right. And in the meantime, we just kept going back to that property near there, and we even thought about buying the lot next door to that house because it was so beautiful. We couldn't find land we liked either. We get another phone call. 2 months later, the deal fell through. The house is back on the market. Okay.
But now you have to
Divine.
deal with the one in Castle Rock, right?
Divine providence
Yeah.
takes hold.
But I think what's interesting in the story that I had to chat with you earlier is that you often got help from unexpected
Oh,
sources.
Yeah.
Unexpected sources, and that's why I thought it might be fun to talk about chickens
Yeah, and the sign, yeah, exactly.
in Castle Rock.
Some ladies driving around our neighborhood, they were visiting someone, they saw the for sale sign. They couldn't buy a house at the time. They had a financial issue. They called our realtor and asked if they could lease our house for a year to buy. We jumped on it, but I thought, when she showed up, I thought, there's no way she's going to want this house. It needed a lot of work, it needed updating, and what's worse is I had gone nuts at that point, and I figured, if I can't move to the country, I'm going to bring the country to me, and I bought about 50 chicks, and they were in boxes in the upstairs bedroom and bathroom, and I'm thinking, and we had complaints from realtors, and I'm thinking, there's no way that they're going to want this house. She shows up, they show up, they look around, I warn them, she comes in and she says, oh, how cute, oh my goodness, and they love the house. Next thing you know, we were leasing the house, and we were planning on signing the papers.
Wow.
And bittersweet, my mom, who was just so happy for me, died about 4 days before we signed the papers. But we signed the papers on our anniversary on June 20th, 2008. And strangely enough, the lot that we thought about buying when we thought we lost that home, we now own that as well. So we have over 75 acres now because my mom, with the money she left me, helped us do that. So it became our farm.
And it's called Prairie Promise Farm. And I don't know if you guys know, but we have a wonderful arts supplement that's been going for 3 months. And Tatiana writes for that. And she usually has the back page. It just seems to be a nice place for her. And she calls it Praise, Prayers, and Ponderings from Prairie Promise Farm. So I wondered if you would explain that name, Prairie Promise Farm. What does that mean to you?
After we got the phone call that the house was available again, hindsight, we saw all these connections, we saw all these things that had happened to make it work. And I just felt like I needed to pay back. It was a promise I made to myself and to God. I'm going to get choked up. I need to pay this. We need to bless other people with this place. And that is my goal. I've already contacted the 4-H club in our neighborhood, in our town, for children who cannot raise an animal in town. They can come out and raise their animal on our property. We had a furnace repair guy out who was going to school to be a minister, and I told him that when he became a minister and had his own church, he could come out and maybe do a retreat or something, because he was just astounded by the property. I said, well, maybe you can do a one-day retreat, or I'd love to have Bible studies out there maybe, something like that. Yeah. Right now, we're selling eggs and raw goat milk. Well, we're not selling goat milk.
Could you please flash the camera? What does it say? I think it says
goat milk.
Goat milk. Right.
So we're blessing people with healthy, free-range food.
But it sounds as if you have come fully alive, and I feel like in our last few minutes here before we turn to questions, can you possibly express what it means to be alive and fully alive out there on Prairie Promise Farm?
I look out my living room window and I thank God every day for that place. And to a lot of people, it's probably a fairly modest house, but I just love it. I thank God every day for it. And I just want to point out that some other signs came into this. We joined the signs. We joined the art museum at some point when we still lived in Castle Rock, and there is a painting hanging up in the western building. That painting is of a view of a prairie, the sky and the prairie and the trees in the background in the horizon. When I look out my living room window, and by the way, I noticed that right away when we looked at the house that first time when we got busted. That scene is right out my living room window. I also, because I love the prairie, ever since I've got a little house on the prairie, I've loved it. But On my cell phone, I had a picture of a lone tree in a field. That was what I chose as my backdrop. Well,
Yeah.
after we moved in, our neighbors cut down all the dead cottonwoods between the two fields. That lone tree is now sitting there, and I can see it every day, and it looks just like my cell phone picture did.
So there's something to be said for really seeing your dream, I think, you know,
Yeah.
imaging your dream.
And I'm waiting for the picket fence. We'll be putting that in, and then my dream will be fulfilled. Goats and all. Sheep, goats, chickens, ducks, geese, bees. My son-in-law is helping me with my first beehive.